Today we're going to look at using a place value chart and some beans to understand what is happening when we divide decimals. So we're going to look at this bottom one right here where it shows 24 hundredths divided by 3. So if you look at the place value chart I have made here, 24 hundredths, you actually have a 2 in the tens place, and then you have 4 hundredths. That's what that would look like. The thing that the children are going to need to understand is that when we divide into groups, we're going to have to rename this. So if I want to divide that into 3 groups, there's no way to divide these 4 beans into 3 groups, and there's no way to divide these 2 beans into 3 groups. So what I want to do is I want to rename these tenths. So if I have 1/10, that's actually 10 hundredths. So I can exchange this guy on the tenth side for 10 hundredths. And this is something that we've worked on, so they should be familiar. Okay. So I took 1 bean from the tenth side and exchanged it for 10 on the hundredths. And I'm going to do the same thing with this guy that's over here because I can't do anything with just this 1/10. I can't split that 3 ways as it exists. So I'm renaming it as 10 hundredths. So let me show you on paper what I just did. So I took 24 hundredths. First I had the tenths and the hundredths, okay, separate. And what I did was I renamed it just as hundredths. So instead of saying there's 2 tenths and 4 hundredths, I renamed that as 24 hundredths. And you can see there's 24 here, and they're all hundredths. So now, if I want to split them into 3 groups, I can easily do that. So I can take my 24 hundredths, and again, I'm only working in the hundredths column. I'm going to make 3 piles. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Whoop. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And if we count up the number of hundredths in each group, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I know that 24 hundredths divided by 3 is going to give me 8 hundredths. Because when I split it up into 3 groups, I ended up with 3 groups with 8 hundredths in each group. Alright, we'll look at another one. Okay, so this one, we're looking at 1 and 5/10 divided by 5. So in this case, again, it's going to be helpful for me to rename it. If I look at it on the place value chart like this, I have 1 and 5/10. If I'm dividing by 5, I can easily divide this up into 5 separate groups, my tenths. However, the problem is going to lie when I get to my ones column. I have only 1 bean. I can't divide that by 5. So what I want to do is exchange this guy for 10 beans in my tenths column. So I'm just renaming it. So I just exchanged it, and now I can easily divide into those 5 groups. And if I divide into 5 groups, there's 3/10 in each group. Let's look at what that looks like on paper. So if I have 1 and 5/10 divided by 5, I want to rename this as 15/10 because 15 divided by 5 is a basic fact. 15 divided by 5 is 5. So when I say 15/10 divided by 5,
3.
I'm sorry, 15/10 divided by 5, it's going to give me 3/10. And you can see there's 3/10 in each one of those groups. We're going to look at a couple of them on the homework because the wording is a little different. This is actually the classwork, but it looks very similar to your homework. So what the children want to do is look at the basic fact in here. So instead of thinking of this as 1 and 6/10, think of this as 16/10. Okay? 4 groups of how many are going to give you 16? If I go back to my multiplication, I have 4 times 4, and that would give me 16. So 4 groups of 4/10 will give me 16/10. If I look at another one right here, okay, think of that as 32/100, which is already written. So think of a basic fact of 32. 8 groups of, well, how many hundredths would give me 32? 8 times what is going to give me 32? If I know that it's 4, 8 times 4 will give me 32. If I look at the next one, my basic fact in here is 84. This time we're in the thousands though. 7 groups of what will give me 84? So 7 times 12 is going to give me 84. So 12 thousandths would be my answer. Alright, so for this one, they want you to express the quotient in units and then in standard form. So they're asking you for unit form and then converting it to standard form. So if you look at this one, let's look at it as 42/10. So 42/10 divided by 7. 7 times what is going to give you 42? 7 times 6. So if I know if I have 42/10 divided by 7, I'm going to get 6/10. So my answer would be 6/10. And then they show you 7. Oh, I mixed up with what they're asking you to do. I got a step ahead of myself. So they want you to, what I did out loud, they want you to rename this. There's a dot there. They want you to rename this as 42/10, which is actually what I did out loud. I just didn't write it on the paper. So 42/10, when I think of that as a whole unit, so 7 times what will give you 42? 7 times 6, 6/10, and then I would write it as standard form. We'll look at another one. So they want you to rename this. They're talking about, let's see, they're dividing by 2. There might be a typo in this one. Divided by 2.
So it'll be 2 ones and 64/100ths, I think.
Okay. 2 ones divided by 2. Okay. So they want you to split it up into hundredths and ones for this one. So 2 ones divided by 2 plus 64 hundredths divided by 2. So they're having you split it into two sections instead of just one. So if I can split the 2 ones, that gives me 1 1. And then the 64, I can also split that in half, divided by 2. That's going to give me 32. And then they want you to go ahead and try and write that in standard form. 1 1 and 32 hundredths. And again, I just want to make sure I end up in the hundredth spot because that will ensure that I have the right answer. If I wasn't in the hundredth spot, we know that we can add zeros in there to slide us back a little further. Okay? So here's some application problems. This one they're asking them to actually do the division. So this one, 12 and 48 milliliters of medicine were separated into 4 doses. So when I see the word separate, I know that I'm trying to divide. When you're splitting anything up or separating, that indicates division. So I'm dividing by 4 milliliters. They want to know how many doses were made. So The other thing I want to do is start off with an answer statement, and that'll help me. So there were blank doses made. And that ensures that I'm focused on answering it correctly. So what I want to do is I want to take this and divide it by 4. I know that my 12 ones are divisible by 4, and I know my 48 hundredths are divisible by 4. So I can think of it separately. I can say, okay, 12 divided by 4 is 3 ones, and 48 hundredths divided by 4 is going to give me 12. So I have 12 hundredths. So if I look at that and want to write it in standard form, I have 3 ones and 12 hundredths. And again, I want to make sure I end up in the hundredths place. So there were 3.12 doses made.